If there is a confrontation over Taiwan between China and the United States, there is no way that the Philippines can stay out of it, simply because of our physical geographic location.
菲律宾奉劝有关方面不要在台湾问题上挑衅，玩火者必自焚。
China accuses the Philippines of playing with fire after President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. says his country would join any China-US conflict over Taiwan.
The heat in Asia's geopolitical kitchen just got cranked up. Imagine the Philippines standing in the middle of two giants, China and the United States, while the issue of Taiwan smolders like a ticking time bomb. That's exactly where President Ferdinand "Bongbong" Marcos Jr. placed his nation after a bold statement that Beijing clearly didn't appreciate. Speaking during his state visit to India, Marcos declared that if an all-out war erupted between the US and China over Taiwan, the Philippines will be drawn into it. His reasoning? Geography doesn't lie. Taiwan is just a stone's throw away, and more than 200,000 Filipinos live and work there. It would be a humanitarian crisis, Marcos said, and we are duty-bound to protect them.
If there is a confrontation over Taiwan between China and the United States, there is no way that the Philippines can stay out of it, simply because of our physical geographic location. To understand how close Taiwan is to the Philippines, the large city of Kaohsiung in Taiwan is a 40-minute flight away from the capital of my province in northern Philippines, in Lawag. That's how close it is. If you think about it, if there is all-out war, then we will be drawn into it. And I assure you with the greatest hesitation, but we will have to defend our territory and our sovereignty.
The message sounded like a pledge to safeguard Filipino lives, but to Beijing, it was a direct jab at their most sensitive red line. It didn't take long for China to fire back, metaphorically, but with words sharp enough to cut. The Chinese Foreign Ministry accused Manila of playing with fire, warning that such talk could destabilize regional peace and violate the One China principle.
奉劝有关方面不要在台湾问题上挑衅，玩火者必自焚。
State-run media piled on, with analysts suggesting Marcos was trying to boost his geo value to Washington, but warned him. Treating the Taiwan question as a bargaining chip will backfire. The timing was telling. This spat came just days after the Philippines held its first-ever joint naval drill with India in the disputed South China Sea, a move Beijing surely noticed. And it's not just drills. Manila has been strengthening its defense ties with Washington, Tokyo, and even Taipei, despite still officially recognizing One China. For Filipinos in Taiwan, these headlines aren't abstract, they're personal. Think of the OFW mother in Kaohsiung messaging her family back in Manila. Anak, baka kailangan ko nang umuwi kung may mangyari. The fear is real because in any Taiwan crisis, they would be on the front line of danger. And here's the sobering truth. Simulations by the International Institute for Strategic Studies show that Southeast Asia isn't ready for a Taiwan conflict. In one scenario, evacuating Filipinos from Taiwan would largely depend on Singapore's military lift capacity, highlighting a glaring gap in regional preparedness. Marcos's words carry a mix of courage and risk. Courage in putting Filipino lives at the forefront. Risk in poking a geopolitical bear that has already shown its teeth in the South China Sea, from laser pointing at Coast Guard vessels to blocking resupply missions at Second Thomas Shoal. The question now is whether the Philippines can walk this razor's edge, balancing national interest, humanitarian duty, and survival without stumbling into a conflict it can't control. Because in the game of superpowers, one wrong move, and the fire you're accused of playing with could engulf you entirely. The spark that set this diplomatic firestorm ablaze came straight from President Ferdinand "Bongbong" Marcos Jr.'s own words. While on a state visit to India, a trip aimed at deepening defense ties and even exploring joint patrols in the contested South China Sea, Marcos didn't mince words about Taiwan. If there is an all-out war, then we will be drawn into it, he said, his tone firm.
If you think about it, if there is all-out war, then we will be drawn into it. We will have to defend our territory and our sovereignty.
He framed it as both a matter of principle. We have a duty to defend our territory and our sovereignty, and a humanitarian obligation, given the staggering 200,000 Filipinos living and working in Taiwan. Marcos painted the picture clearly. If tensions across the Taiwan Strait boil over, Manila won't have the luxury of watching from the sidelines. For him, it's not just geopolitics, it's geography, family, and national duty all colliding on one dangerous fault line. China's answer didn't just come, it erupted. Within hours of President Marcos Jr.'s remarks hitting global headlines, Beijing's Ministry of Foreign Affairs released what can only be described as a diplomatic thunderbolt, a statement so sharply worded it practically crackled with warning. The message was short on pleasantries and long on fire. Do not play with fire over Taiwan. In those few words, the Chinese government signaled that Marcos's comments had touched their most sensitive nerve. For Beijing, the stakes could not be higher. The ministry reiterated, almost ritualistically, that Taiwan is an inalienable part of China, and that the Taiwan question is purely an internal affair in which no foreign government has the right to meddle. But this wasn't just a public scolding, it was a full-on diplomatic offensive. Chinese officials lodged serious protests with Manila, formally summoning the Philippine ambassador to deliver the warning face-to-face. In that meeting, they accused the Philippines of hollowing out the One China principle, the diplomatic understanding that has served as the fragile foundation of China-Philippines ties for decades. The phrasing was deliberate. By using hollowing out, Beijing implied that Marcos's government wasn't outright abandoning the policy, but slowly gutting it through subtle provocative moves. Joint naval patrols with U.S. forces near Taiwan's waters, expanding military access to American troops under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA, and now, making statements that Beijing views as preparing the ground for political interference.
China's ministry didn't stop at political accusations.
It went for the legal jugular. They insisted that geographical proximity to Taiwan and the presence of 200,000 Filipino nationals on the island are not excuses for interfering in another country's internal affairs. They tied this to a broader legal argument, saying such remarks contravene international law and even the ASEAN Charter, an intentional move to frame the Philippines not only as a troublemaker in China's eyes, but as a violator of regional principles in Southeast Asia itself. For Beijing, this isn't just about the Philippines. It's about sending a warning shot to any ASEAN nation thinking of siding with the US in a Taiwan crisis. The tone was unmistakable. Beijing views Manila's current trajectory, tightening defense ties with the US, India, and even quietly with Taiwan, as dangerous, provocative, and deeply unwelcome. In the chessboard of Asia-Pacific politics, this was China slamming a piece on the table and daring the Philippines to make its next move. And for ordinary Filipinos, especially those with family in Taiwan, the subtext was chilling. Beijing is making it clear that in any cross-strait crisis, Manila's choices will be watched under a microscope, and the consequences for wrong moves could be swift and punishing. The flare-up over Marcos's Taiwan remarks isn't happening in a vacuum. It's just the latest chapter in a long and turbulent saga between Manila and Beijing. For years, the South China Sea has been the region's boiling pot, and the Philippines has often found itself right on the front burner. At flashpoints like Second Thomas Shoal and Scarborough Shoal, the Philippine Coast Guard has faced off with China's larger, more aggressive Coast Guard in dangerous encounters that would be unthinkable just a decade ago. Water cannons blasting, vessels ramming, and supply missions being blocked. These aren't theoretical risks. They're real, physical confrontations happening in contested waters. Back in 2016, an international tribunal in The Hague sided decisively with the Philippines, rejecting China's sweeping claims under its 9-dash line. Beijing's answer? Total rejection of the ruling, backed by an even more assertive presence at sea. Complicating this already volatile equation is the US-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty. Under this decades-old alliance, Washington has repeatedly reaffirmed that it will come to Manila's aid if Filipino forces or even Coast Guard personnel are attacked anywhere in the South China Sea. This is not an empty statement. US warships and surveillance aircraft have been more visible in the region, often operating close to Philippine waters, signaling that America is prepared to put steel in the water if push comes to shove. That promise of protection is a double-edged sword. It deters aggression, but it also raises the risk that any skirmish, planned or accidental, could trigger a far bigger fight. And then there's Taiwan, the quiet but undeniable third pillar in this equation. While the Philippines doesn't formally recognize Taipei, the two maintain robust unofficial ties. Trade, investment, labor, and cultural exchanges run deep. Taiwan is home to over 200,000 Filipinos, many working in factories, care homes, and the tech sector. For Washington, Manila isn't just a South China Sea ally, it's a potential staging ground in any Taiwan contingency, a geopolitical flashpoint connecting the two theaters of tension. That role comes with opportunities, but also paints a target on the Philippines in the eyes of Beijing, which already views U.S. allies as extensions of American strategy in Asia. When you put it all together, South China Sea confrontations, U.S. security guarantees, and Taiwan's growing relevance, you get a picture of a nation standing at the crossroads of history. The Philippines isn't just reacting to global events, it's sitting at the intersection where they collide. And that intersection is getting busier and more dangerous by the day. Behind the heated words and military maneuvers lies a quieter but equally explosive battleground: the economy. China may be the Philippines' fiercest maritime rival, but it's also the country's top trading partner, with billions of dollars in imports, exports, and investments flowing between them every year. For any Philippine leader, this creates a diplomatic tightrope. Push too hard on sovereignty, and you risk economic retaliation. Stay too quiet, and you risk national security and public trust. Under President Marcos Jr., the balance has shifted noticeably. Unlike his predecessor, Rodrigo Duterte, who leaned heavily on Beijing for economic deals, Marcos has shown a willingness to put national security over economic appeasement, even if that means straining trade ties. But if economics is the soft power game, military posture is the hard edge, and Manila is sharpening it fast. In just the past 2 years, the Philippines has deepened its security ties with other Indo-Pacific powers like the United States, Japan, and India, participating in joint naval drills that send a clear signal to Beijing. The Philippines isn't standing alone. Washington, for its part, has doubled down, building new military facilities under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement and pre-positioning equipment in strategic northern provinces within striking distance of Taiwan. At the same time, Manila has boosted its own defense spending, acquiring new patrol vessels, radar systems, and air assets to better police its waters. The result? A small but determined nation turning itself into a regional security hub, even as it relies economically on the very power it's preparing to counter. It's a gamble that blends strategy with survival, one that could pay off in stronger deterrence or backfire if tensions cross the line into open confrontation. In geopolitics, that's the razor's edge the Philippines is now walking every single day.
Beijing warns the Philippines is playing with fire after President Marcos Jr. suggested Manila might intervene in a potential Taiwan Strait conflict.
President Marcos's blunt remarks on Taiwan have done more than make headlines. They've nudged the Philippines closer to the eye of the storm in the US-China rivalry. By stating plainly that the Philippines would inevitably be drawn into a Taiwan conflict, Marcos has forced the country into a conversation it can no longer avoid. China's fierce warning was no mere diplomatic formality. It was a statement of resolve, a reminder that Beijing considers the one China principle non-negotiable, and that any perceived interference will be met with political heat and possibly more tangible consequences. Now, the road ahead for Manila is as tricky as it is dangerous. On one side lies its economic lifeline, China, the Philippines' largest trading partner and a crucial market for its exports. On the other is its security backbone, the United States, bound by a mutual defense treaty that promises protection but also comes with obligations. And in between lies the Philippines' own sovereign stake in the South China Sea, where its rights have been backed by international law but contested daily by Chinese ships. The question is no longer whether the Philippines will be involved in the shifting tides of Indo-Pacific geopolitics. It's how it will navigate them without capsizing. Every move Manila makes will be scrutinized by allies and adversaries alike. Will it lean harder into US-led security partnerships and risk Beijing's economic wrath? Will it temper its rhetoric to keep trade flowing while quietly bolstering its defenses? Or will it find a middle path, one that safeguards both sovereignty and stability? One thing is certain, the potential for a wider regional conflict is not just a think tank scenario, it's a shadow hanging over every decision. And for a nation of over 100 million people, many with loved ones working in the very places that could become flashpoints, the stakes are as real as they get. The Philippines is not just watching history unfold, it's standing in the middle of the page, pen in hand, writing its next chapter in the world's most volatile geopolitical story.
If you liked the video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for deep analysis of contemporary issues.